Good morning and welcome to Tuesday, Truth and Treasure. My name is Leticia and I'm happy you're here. Today we're going to be talking about how the enemy distracts us from our vision and purpose, and specifically looking at truths and treasures through the life of Samson. One of the childhood stories that I think we all remember, and honestly, I think a lot of people know the story of Samson, whether they're Christian or not Christian. It's one of those beloved stories that a lot of people can identify with or just know about. Let's say a quick prayer and get started. Lord Jesus, thank you so much for meeting us here every single week, for your loving kindness that extends forever and ever. I thank you for loving me and for dying on the cross for me even while I was still a sinner. Lord, I pray that you would anoint my words, that you would give us ears to listen, and that you would have us learn something from your word today, that you help us get deeper and deeper in your word. Never quite satisfied with what we have, always wanting more. Lord, thank you so much for this privilege and this opportunity to learn more about you and how I should live my life. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Okay, we're going to be primarily in the book of Judges, but I want to start off by giving you 4 things to consider. Thing number 1, every single one of us has a purpose. Everyone. Every one of us has a purpose and a gift. 1 Corinthians 7:7 says, but each one has his own gift from God, one in his manner and another in that. So they may not all be the same, but each one of us definitely has a purpose and a gift. Okay? Thing to consider number 2. Your purpose is an answer to a problem. Ephesians 2:10 says, for we are his workmanship, created in Jesus Christ for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. So if you think about the light bulb and how it solved the darkness problem, things are invented and things are created to solve a problem. So our purpose is tied to a problem that exists. Thing number 3, your purpose is the object of attention for the enemy. Remember that Revelation 12, 9-10 calls him the accuser of the brethren. 1 Peter 5:8 says, be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. So you are the problem solver. We established that you have a purpose, that your purpose is an answer to the problem. And while you're the problem solver, he's the problem instigator. So the enemy is looking around to see what problems can he cause, where can he mess up plans, what can he do. That's his role. Now, number 4, your purpose doesn't require perfection or even that you be completely skilled at what you're supposed to do. But it does require us to focus on vision and to be free from bondage. So in order for us to do what we're supposed to do, we need to be free from bondage and we need to be focused on it. 2 Peter 1:3 says, his divine power has given us everything we need for a godly life through our knowledge of him who called us by his own glory and goodness. So everything we need to live a godly life or to fulfill our purpose is already inside of us. He's deposited it there. It's just our responsibility to make it grow. So with those 4 things, I want to start diving into the life of Samson, because if you think about it, if we need focus and if we need freedom to pursue vision, what do you think the enemy does? He introduces distractions to keep us focused on everything, basically everything other than your vision and your purpose. So introducing Samson. If you go to Judges 13, 1-5, I'm going to be reading from mostly probably NIV. Again, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord, so the Lord delivered them into the hands of the Philistines for 40 years. A certain man of Zorah named Manoah from the clan of the Danites had a wife who was childless, unable to give birth. The angel of the Lord appeared to her and said, you are barren and childless, but you are going to become pregnant and give birth to a son. Now see to it that you drink no wine or other fermented drink, and that you do not eat anything unclean. You will become pregnant and have a son whose head is never to be touched by a razor, because that boy is to be a Nazirite, dedicated to God from the womb. He will take the lead in delivering Israel from the hands of the Philistines. So even before he was conceived, even before Samson was conceived, Samson had a purpose. He was the answer to the Philistine problem. Samson was. But the angel was clear. He had to be a Nazarite. Now, Nazarite comes from the word Nazir, which means separated one. Number 6 explains that when someone was wanting to make a special vow, they would become a Nazarite for a certain period of time, maybe like a week or 6 months to a year. I guess you can maybe describe it as a form of fasting, just to get the point across. But number 6 explains it pretty well. Number 6, 2-6 says, "Speak to the Israelites and say to them, if a man or a woman wants to make a special vow, a vow of dedication to the Lord as a Nazarite, they must abstain from wine and other fermented drink. They must not drink vinegar made from wine or other fermented drink. They must not drink grape juice or eat grapes or raisins. As long as they remain under Nazarite vow, they may not eat anything that comes from the grapevine, not even the seeds or the skins. So during the entire period of their Nazarite vow, no razor may be used on their head. They must be holy until the period of their dedication to the Lord is over. They must let their hair grow long. Throughout the period of their dedication to the Lord, the Nazarite must not go near a dead body." So you see, that was how these were the Nazarite rules if you wanted to do a special dedication or a special vow. But Samson, according to the angel, was supposed to live like this for a lifetime. You see, but the enemy is intent on Samson not fulfilling his purpose. So he begins to employ early on strategies to keep Samson from fulfilling this purpose. We're going to go through them kind of one by one by going through his life. Now, we don't really know anything about his childhood. And at this point, we don't know how he's going to take the lead or how he'll have this superpower strength. We just know that his purpose is going to be to help answer a Philistine problem. That's his purpose. Because the very next time we read about him, Samson is already older. And it's in Judges 14, 1-3. "Samson went down to Timnah and saw there a young Philistine woman. When he returned, he said to his father and mother, 'I have seen a Philistine woman in Timnah. Now go get her for me as my wife.' His father and mother replied, 'Isn't there acceptable women among your relatives or among our people? Must you go to the uncircumcised Philistines to get a wife?' But Samson said to his father, 'Get her for me. She's the right one for me.'" So here we begin to see the very first strategy the enemy uses to keep us from our purpose. Number 1, he ties our hands with something that is in direct opposition with the agenda of God in our life. I mean, if Samson's purpose, think about it, was to free his people from the Philistine rule, why would he marry into them? Don't you see there how his hands maybe could be tied? He would form bonds or relationships, and then when God calls him to do something that he's supposed to do, that he's all wrapped up in his feelings about it, or how he might have made a connection with this person or that person, because he's involving in things he should never have been involved in. He was supposed to be a solution to the Philistine problem. He wasn't supposed to marry into the Philistines. But the thing is that bondage, when it approaches us, it's never, I think this is a mistake people make. The enemy doesn't come in a red suit with horns. He comes in a beautiful package, dressed beautifully, like the thing that we are susceptible to. He comes dressed like fun. So when we see it, it feels like fun and exciting. It doesn't feel like the enemy's, coming at us with the pitchfork. It doesn't feel like that. It feels like fun. And that's exactly what this woman was for Samson. So it's important to note that even before the Bible talks about Samson's supernatural strength, the enemy's already begun to build bondage with these complications and distractions. Judges 14, 5-10 says, "Samson went down to Timnah together with his father and mother, and as they approached the vineyards of Timnah, suddenly a young lion came roaring towards them. The Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him, so that he tore the lion apart with his bare hands as he might have torn apart a goat. But he told neither his father nor his mother what he had done. Then he went down and talked with the woman, and he liked her. Sometime later, he went back to marry her. He turned aside to the lion's carcass, and in it he saw a swarm of bees and some honey. He scooped out the honey with his hands and ate it as he went along. When he rejoined his parents, he gave them some, and they too ate it. But he did not tell them where he had taken the honey from the lion's carcass. Now his father went down to see a woman, and there Samson held a feast, as was customary for young men. So think about the vow that he had as the Nazarite. He wasn't supposed to even be near a vineyard, yet here he is near a vineyard. He wasn't supposed to touch a dead carcass, yet here he is fishing out some honey from this dead carcass. And Samson, who's supposed to be separate, who's supposed to be different than everybody else, is holding a feast, as was customary for young men. So he's walking this fence dangerously. He's not living his life separately, apart, or wholly. He is walking super close to these boundaries, and he actually broke one of the rules. But what he noticed here is that the power didn't leave him. So he broke one of the rules, but he still had his strength. He touched the carcass, but it didn't matter because he was still strong. So he tells the Philistines a riddle and says, if you can figure it out, I'll give you 30 sets of clothes. Otherwise, you owe me 30 sets of clothes. That's like summary version of it. So this was the riddle. Judges 14:14. He replied, out of the eater, something to eat. Out of the strong, something sweet. For 3 days, they could not give an answer. They couldn't figure it out. So on the 4th day, this is Judges 14:15-17, they said to Samson's wife, coax your husband into explaining the riddle to us, for we will burn you and your father's house to death. Did you invite us here to steal our property? Then Samson's wife threw himself on him, sobbing, you hate me. You don't really love me. You've given my people a riddle, but you haven't told me the answer. I haven't even explained it to my father or mother, he replied. So why should I even explain it to you? She cried the whole 7 days of the feast. So on the 7th day, he finally told her because she continued to press him. She, in turn, explained the riddle to her people. So he finally tells her, after she keeps on and on and on, he tells her, she tells them, and then he kills 30 of their own men to pay the debt. And he's angry. He's fuming about this. And then comes Judges 14:20. And Samson's wife was given to one of his companions who had attended him at the feast. So his own wife was given to someone else. So see, Samson had a purpose. Samson's life had a vision. He was supposed to be solving the Philistine problem. But see, now we begin to see how Satan is using this next strategy that we're going to talk about to distract him. On Judges 15:1-3, it says, later on, at the time of the wheat harvest, Samson took a young goat and went to visit his wife. He said, I'm going into my wife's room. But her father would not let him go in. I was so sure you hated her, he said, that I gave her to your companion. Isn't her younger sister more attractive? Take her instead. Samson said to them, this time I have a right to get even with the Philistines. I will really harm them. He was so angry, so he got these 300 foxes, and he tied their tails in pairs, and he lights them on fire, and they burn up grain, vineyards, olive groves. So the Philistines kill his wife and her father. And Samson said to them in Judges 15:7-8, since you've acted like this, I swear that I won't stop until I get my revenge on you. He attacked them viciously and slaughtered many of them. And then he went down and stayed in a cave in the rock of Edom. So the second strategy that the enemy uses to block you from your purpose is your past. Samson here is, think about this. Think about his whole purpose was to solve the Philistine problem. Now, albeit, remember that God's will is accomplished no matter what. So no matter Samson's poor decision making or the what he does to do this and that when he shouldn't be involved with the Philistine, he shouldn't be married, he shouldn't be doing half the stuff that he's doing, but God ends up using it for his glory to accomplish what has to be accomplished, and that's to get rid of the Philistines. So he was still doing what he needed to do, but not willingly, not prayerfully, not not in the same way that he would have had he really been dedicated to his Nazirite vow, had he really been dedicated to the purpose and vision that he had in his life. But this second strategy where the enemy uses, he becomes so enraged about what has happened to him that his burning desire is to get revenge on them. And this is what the enemy does to us too. He uses our past to haunt us, to keep us sort of trapped in this cycle of anger and hurt, and we stay locked in it. And when we stay locked there, it impacts our future decisions. It impacts our ability to pursue God's plan for our life. And Samson is so focused on getting revenge that he forgets that this strength, it was not for show. It was not for him to get revenge on people. It was to protect Israel. Preacher Leonard Ravenhill said this quote that's really amazing. The opportunity of a lifetime must be seized in the lifetime of the opportunity. This means that we have to strike while the iron is hot. You have to do stuff. We have to do stuff while we can. But a lot of times we don't do that, and we don't fulfill our role and our purpose because we're focused on things that are not worth our while. Sometimes we miss out on what we should be doing while we have the chance because we're focused on things that are not worth our while. Nehemiah 6:3. I love the story of Nehemiah, and I'll have to share it on another day because it's one of my favorite stories. In 6:3, he says, I am carrying on a great project and cannot come down. Why should the work stop while I leave to go down to you? So Nehemiah had people bugging him he was trying to build a wall, and he had people bugging him to go meet with them, and they were honestly just distractions. And this verse right here is a great leadership verse, because a lot of times we get distracted doing things and our work stops. So we come off this wall for stuff that's not worth our while. And when we come off the wall, the enemy's laughing. We spend all this time arguing with people in our head, planning what we're going to say next or what we should have said. And here's the key. The enemy keeps us stuck in what happened, and we miss what's happening. And I cannot tell you how long I was stuck here. I was in a depression probably for most of 2014, the tail end of 2013, and it just devastated me. I did not want to work. I mean, I cried every day. I went to a counselor weekly for 18 months, and I just could not pull myself out of it. I didn't want to drive. I couldn't sit and just think. So I started Netflix binging. Oh my goodness, I think about all the time that I wasted during that time, but I was so stuck in what had happened, and there was this is definitely a strategy of the enemy, right? For us to stay stuck in what happened. And there was this particular sermon, one of the things that I started doing during this time. God is so good, even in my despair and craziness. Somebody introduced me to a preacher, and I started listening to his sermons, and I would just look for some that looked like they would be about depression, and I would listen to them. And I listened to them non-stop so that I wouldn't have to be dealing with any thoughts in my mind. I just would keep listening to them. And there was one that I listened to over and over, and I loved it so much that I did a transcript of it myself, of a certain section that I would listen to every little while. And in this message, he says, he says this, and I wrote this down, and I want to read it to you. I can still hear him say it. I can hear him, the inflections he uses when he says it. I love it. And he says, let it go. It is not worth your while. It's over. It's gone. It hurt. It happened. But it is not worth your while to stand in dead places, regretting dead dreams that will never come to pass. It is not worth your while, because while you are focused on that, you can't build this. You see, we have to let go of our past and be able to discern when the enemy is using that to hold us back, because that is a strategy. So with Samson, not only did he try to entangle him with his whole subject, like with the Philistines and distractionary way to build bonds and relationships when he needed to be attacking them. But then he used this with his wife that he should have never been with. Now his whole goal is to seek revenge on them when he needed to be focused on his real mission and vision and purpose. Okay, the third scheme. Satan entices us to self-destruct, just like he did to Adam and Eve. I mean, for 20 years, Samson led. He continued to misuse his power. He spent the night with a prostitute, tore the city gate walls, and they were estimated at weighing 2.5 tons. He tore them down to get away. But this strength was never for show. That's the thing. But then he meets Delilah, and he falls in love. Delilah, that was interesting, comes from the word Delal, and it means to weaken and impoverish. And before we move on, I have to say, I grew up always thinking Samson looked probably like a Bobbio kind of person. But after all this, I don't know. I don't know anymore if he looked. Maybe he just looked like a normal scrawny guy. Maybe even smaller than normal, because it would have probably been obvious where strength came from otherwise, right? I mean, he didn't, probably people didn't think he was that strong. It probably came as a shock. I don't know. I'm guessing there. That's me. I'm just a guess. I guess we'll see one day, right? Judges 16:4-5 says, sometime later, he fell in love with a woman of the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. The rulers of the Philistines went to her and said, see if you can lure him into showing you the secret of his great strength and how we can overpower him so we may tie him up and subdue him. Each one of us will give you 1,100 shekels of silver. So the Philistines have to figure out a way to weaken him. And so she begins to press him. She's pressing him. Judges 16:6. So Delilah said to Samson, tell me the secret of your great strength and how you can be tied and subdued. I mean, and really he's been through this before, right? I mean, the same thing. The wife did almost the exact same thing. Tell me the joke. Tell me, I don't understand how he doesn't get it. But he stays. And I mean, I think why is he staying? Why doesn't he see through this? But he stays for the same reason we keep doing things that we know we shouldn't. It's easy. It feels harmless. We feel invincible, like we'll be able to handle things even when they really get tough. But this is not just a story of lust. Samson is not just a story of lust. It's a story that illustrates, honestly, so clearly how the enemy uses his schemes to destroy us. Because when we're weak, we're dumb, like super dumb. We're really dumb and we're not paying attention. So she presses him every day. Judges 16, 7, 11, 13, and 7 says, Samson answered her, if anyone ties me with 7 fresh bowstrings that have not been dried, I'll become as weak as any other man. He said, if anyone ties me securely with new ropes that have never been used, I'll become as weak as any other man. And if you notice, each time he fell asleep, he was tired. He stopped paying attention, and he was getting closer and closer to his head, closer and closer to the boundary. If you weave the 7 braids of my head into the fabric on the loom and tighten it with the pin, that's verse 13, I'll become as weak as any other man. So while he was sleeping, Delilah took 7 braids of his head and wove them into fabric. I mean, why didn't he stop himself? That's what I keep thinking. Why didn't he remove himself from the situation? I mean, it's so easy to be an outsider and think that, but this preacher told a story a long time ago that I never forgot, where they did this whole experiment with some sort of monkey or gorilla or whatever. They put a cage, and they put it was a locked cage, and inside the locked cage was a bunch of bananas, and the gorillas would come up to it and they would reach their hand inside and grab a banana. And the cage was built in such a way that they could always pull their hand out and be free to go, because again, the cage was locked, the bananas were inside. But if they did not let go, the banana could not come out with them. So the banana was stuck inside. And they captured so many gorillas or this type of species because they just didn't want to let go of the banana. So they were free all along, but yet they held on to the thing that was tying them down. They held on to the bondage. They refused to let it go. And so Delilah keeps this. I feel like that that, refusing to let go and staying locked, that's us choosing that when we could easily let it go at any time and be free. That's what bondage does to us. It just makes us not think clearly. So Delilah keeps pressing, keeps asking, keeps nagging, and finally he becomes tired and gives in. So he tells her everything. No razor has ever been used on my head, he said, verse 17, because I've been a Nazarite dedicated to God from my mother's womb. If my head were shaved, my strength would leave me and I would become as weak as any other man. She knew he had told her everything because when the Philistines returned, they had the silver in their hands. Judges 16:18 and 19 says, when Delilah saw that he had told her everything, she sent word to the rulers of the Philistines, come back once more. He's told me everything. So the rulers of the Philistines returned with the silver in their hands after putting him to sleep on her lap. Think about that. My goodness. She called for someone to shave off the 7 braids of his hair and so began to subdue him, and his strength left him. So he's laying on her lap. Think about that. She's coaxing him, tell me, tell me, tell me. It almost feels like a slithering snake, honestly. But we may never know. We may never be strong when we're weak, but we can be smart. I mean, you can make decisions before you're stuck in that situation, before you get in that situation to decide, how am I going to handle this? How am I going to handle that? You have boundaries and you have guidelines that you live your life by. Because by the time you get to the point where you're lying down on Delilah's lap, it's too late to say no. You can't, you won't be able to. I read in a commentary that said that Samson had probably already broken 2 of the other rules of being a Nazarite. He'd already touched a corpse. We already knew that because he touched the carcass of that lion. But he probably had already drank wine or been around it when he was explicitly prohibited from doing that. So he had to have known that she would have tried to cut his hair. I'm imagining he had to have known that. But he took a calculated risk. And maybe he took that gamble because he thought, hey, I've already touched the carcass, I've already been around the wine, nothing's happened, I still have my strength. So maybe he wasn't feeling the repercussions immediately of those decisions, and so he was thinking this would be okay. I don't know, I'm kind of trying to put myself in that situation and guessing why would he have done this again and again. But we know God's word, and we know that God will not be mocked, and so what he says will happen. And he lost his strength. But another interesting point is that she did not cut his hair. She called someone else to do it. Judges 16:20-22 says, then she called, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. And he awoke from his sleep and thought, I'll go out before and shake myself free. I'll go out as before and shake myself free. But he did not know that the Lord had left him. He did not know that the Lord had left him. Then the Philistines seized him, gouged out his eyes, and took him down to Gaza. Blinding him with bronze shackles, they set him to grinding grain in the prison. Sin will bind you, it'll blind you, and it'll grind you. The enemy doesn't mind us living if we're living a purposeless life. They bound him up. They gouged his eyes out, because when you're bound, you cannot see. And the enemy takes your vision first because, without vision, the people perish, just like it says in Proverbs 29:18. And he spent the rest of his life grinding wheat, miserable, purposeless, because that's what life feels like outside of God's purpose for your life. You're busy, but you're not accomplishing anything. I think in this day and age, people mistake being busy for being productive. This CEO of our company a while back gave us this story about these processional caterpillars, that they put this piece of food or something right in the middle, and then they set these caterpillars around in a circle. And these caterpillars are trained to follow each other. They're called processional caterpillars. And he said the food was in the middle, and the caterpillars kind of went around and around and around and around until they died. And he said, what's the moral of the story? Never confuse activity with productivity. Just because you're active, just because you're moving, doesn't mean you're getting anything done. And I think that's exactly the case nowadays, where people are active, they're moving, they're constantly busy, and yet doing nothing that matters. So in the end, Samson's own strength was destroyed by his own weakness. His own weakness destroyed him. He destroyed his own self. But God, this is so good. Verse 22, 16:22. But the hair on his head began to grow again after it had been shaved. So even though his hair was shaved, his hair began to grow again. I love that verse because it shows God's nature, that he is forgiving, that his grace is there. We do not deserve it. It's totally unmerited, but yet he gives it to us anyway. And I'm so grateful for that. Sometime later, everybody's celebrating, because that's what the enemy does when he succeeds in distracting us from God's given destiny. He then celebrates about it. Judges 16:25-26. Well, while they were in high spirits, they shouted, "Bring out Samson to entertain us." So they called Samson out of the prison, and he performed for them. While he stood among the pillars, Samson said to the servant who held his hand, "Put me where I can feel the pillars that support the temple, so that I may lean against them." And then Samson prayed to the Lord, "Sovereign Lord, remember me. Please, God, strengthen me just once more, and let me get one blow to get revenge on the Philistines for my 2 eyes." Samson said, "Let me die with the Philistines." Then he pushed with all his might, and down came the temple on the rulers and all the people in it. Thus he killed many more people when he died than when he lived. He prayed to God, he humbled himself, and he realized what he did, and in the end he fulfilled his purpose. But what a glorious life I feel like Samson could have had. What a glorious life if he would have been able to discern the enemy's schemes. It's a story to me of wasted potential. He wasted this time, this potential that he could have had, been living such a glorious life, fulfilling what he was called to do. So I guess the lesson with us from Samson and the truth and treasure for us is that we all have a purpose. We are all here to solve a problem. We all have a job in the kingdom. We all do, but we have to stay focused. We cannot get what we need to get done if we're distracted, paying attention to everything that comes our way. Not everything is equally important. And if you're paying everything equal importance, then nothing is important. By making everything important, it makes nothing important. Remember 1 Peter 5:8. Be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour. This story of Samson, I guess, I didn't realize before I studied this how his past sort of kept him in this revenge phase, and how he brought his own demise. He could have lived such a wonderful, purpose-filled life, but he didn't. And it's a lesson to all of us to be alert, because the enemy is trying to destroy you. Don't let him. Stay focused. Okay, guys, that's it for today. I will see you next time, and be sure to tune in tomorrow. Like it, subscribe, and tomorrow we join Theodosia with Wisdom and Wonder. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.